Greetings and welcome back to A Wolf Uncaged. There are moments when a news story stops feeling like news and starts feeling more like a warning. The tragic death of Rob Ryder and his wife at the hands of his own son has shaken people not just because of the violence, but because it forces us to look at something far more uncomfortable. I'm not talking about evil. I'm not talking about monsters. In this case, I'm talking about broken belief systems. You see, Seth tells us that no action occurs in a vacuum. Every act, especially the most unthinkable ones, emerges from a long chain of inner distortions that are reinforced over time by environment, by pressure, and identity confusion. This is not about excusing violence, no. This is about understanding how consciousness fractures. Because when belief collapses, behavior follows. Rob Ryder lived and worked in Hollywood. Hollywood is a world that sells fantasy as oxygen, a place where identity is measured by visibility, where worth is confused with relevance, where success is loud and failure is silent. Hollywood does not create addiction, although it may seem to. Hollywood amplifies whatever belief a person already carries about themselves. If you believe that you are replaceable, Hollywood confirms it. If you believe you must perform to be loved, Hollywood rewards it until it doesn't. If you believe your value is conditional, Hollywood turns that belief into a lifestyle. And children raised in that environment absorb those beliefs before they ever even have a chance to question them. Seth reminds us that children do not merely listen to what parents say. Children inherit emotional atmospheres. Pressure is absorbed. Anxiety absorbed. Unspoken fear becomes internal law. When a child grows up in an environment where image outweighs being, where silence replaces emotional honesty, where pain is medicated instead of understood, that child does not grow into freedom. That child grows into fragmentation. Addiction in Seth's framework is not about substances, no. Addiction is about disconnection from the self. Drugs do not create the void. Drugs attempt to fill it. They offer temporary relief from a belief that says, I'm not enough. Not as I am. I cannot cope sober. I cannot exist without escape. And once that belief takes hold, behavior becomes unpredictable. You see, addiction can make people do things they would never do otherwise, not because they're evil, but because the inner compass has been shattered. This is where tragedy escalates. Because when a person no longer identifies with their own humanity, when they feel trapped in shame, dependency, and perceived failure, the ego begins to distort reality. Fear replaces empathy. Survival overrides love. The mind narrows into desperation. Seth warns that when identity collapses, actions can become disassociated from moral awareness. That is not an excuse. It's an explanation. What makes this story even more devastating is that it happened within a family. Families are belief systems in motion. Unhealed pain passes quietly from one generation to the next, not through words, but through atmosphere. Stress unspoken becomes tension inherited. Expectations unexamined becomes pressure embodied. Love that is conditional becomes fear that is constant. And when drugs enter that system, they don't just affect one person. No, they destabilize everyone. This tragedy forces us to confront an uncomfortable truth. We live in a culture that celebrates surface success, but it neglects inner stability. We glorify fame, but we ignore the psychological cost. We normalize over medication, emotional suppression, and constant performance. And then we act shocked when people break. Seth would say this is a collective belief failure. So the lesson here is not fear. The lesson is awareness. If beliefs create reality, then unexamined beliefs can destroy it. If children absorb emotional truth more than spoken words, then healing must begin internally, not performatively. If addiction is a signal of inner fracture, then punishment alone will never heal it. And if tragedy feels senseless, it may be because we are still looking only at the surface. Seth reminds us that every moment contains a point of power. Even this one. We can choose to look deeper. We can choose to value emotional truth over image. We can choose to address pain before it hardens into fate. Because when belief systems are healed early, realities change quietly. And tragedies like this don't have to repeat themselves. This is not just a story about Rob Ryder. No. This is not just a story about Hollywood. This is not just a story about addiction. This is a mirror. And what we do with that reflection is where the real work begins. I am Tony Victory, a wolf uncaged. Thank you for watching. Thank you for listening. Don't forget to like, subscribe, and share. Thank you to all that have supported this channel through Buy Me a Coffee. Until the next time, peace.